You know, for a kid's movie about an overweight panda becoming a martial arts expert, Kung Fu Panda doesn't half have a compelling soundtrack. And one of the best tracks that everyone thinks of when they think Kung Fu Panda is Oogway Ascends. And it's a piece by Hans Zimmer and John Powell. John Powell being the guy who did How to Train Your Dragon, legendary kids movie composer in terms of that kind of side of the industry. And then obviously Hans Zimmer, you don't need an explanation from me to tell you who Hans Zimmer is. So there's lots of reasons why Oogway Ascends is a really compelling track, despite it not needing to be at all. And one of my favorite reasons why this is because it makes you feel two things at once. And this is a really difficult and precise art in composing. And the fact that so much effort and care went into this piece of music in the middle of a DreamWorks kids action movie with Jack Black as the protagonist just stuns me. So let's try and break down how Oogway Ascends from the Kung Fu Panda soundtrack manages to walk the line between happy, sad, bitter, and sweet all at the same time without ever once committing too far to being over the top or cheesy. So first things first, I think it's important to talk about the main melody that we hear in the track. So I'm going to jump to the piano and I'll show you. So the main melody goes a little bit like this. And it continues on like that. It is a melody that if you've seen Kung Fu Panda, you cannot stop humming it, thinking it, whistling it, crying about it in your sleep. And let's not get too distracted by the instrumentation at this phase. This is actually an erhu, a Chinese kind of bowed string instrument. And it's played really, really beautifully in this track. And it all just intensifies what I'm about to discuss. So let's take that. Let's put it aside for a second and let's go back to piano and kind of really break this down. So the melody kind of hovers above this quite bittersweet chord progression, which I think it's important to kind of break this down before we really go into it as well. So the chord progression is this. So it starts with a D minor, heads up to a F major, G minor, B flat major. And that kind of move, I play it slightly how it's played in the track, but the move actually is, if you follow the bass, D up to an F, up to a G, up to a B flat. And that's like quite a nice climbing riff there. And also it's important to note, and this happens a lot in a lot of tracks, but contributing to that bittersweet feeling of the melody and of the accompaniment here is that we start in decidedly minor, we move to a very bright major, then back to another minor, and then up to another major. And then we come back to the F. So we have a lot of composing tricks happening already to make this bittersweet, just in the chord progression and in its choice of tonality and how it flips quite deliberately through these chords. But one of the ways that this theme or this hook manages to stay with you so much is because of how you hear it in the rest of the film. And actually, quite importantly, the first time you hear it in the film is the first word of the film. And it is no coincidence that this theme is laid alongside Po confronting his dreams of becoming the Dragon Warrior before he's even started his journey. We hear the riff immediately, and we're given this aspiration of who Po wants to become by the end of the film. Legend tells of a legendary warrior whose kung fu skills were the stuff of a legend. So immediately, your association with this theme is an elegant, legendary warrior who has done his piece to make China safe for all the people in the world. And you see as the scene goes on, it gets more and more epic, over the top, actiony, but it all represents Poe's wants, desires, and dreams. So cut to later in the movie, we've just gone through all we've gone through with Poe and the whole team, and Poe isn't a fit for the Dragon Warrior. And Shifu is horrified, doesn't know how he's going to make Poe the right guy to be the guy. And this is a point where Master Oogway, who is docile, measured, gentle, and a crowd-pleasing character in many other ways, decides he's going to just off himself. He runs out of life. He's kind of, he leaves, and he leaves Shifu to take his staff and become the next great teacher. So immediately, in hearing Oogway Ascends underneath this scene, we associate what we've seen of Poe in that intro. And what we've seen of Poe every time there's a sense of hope or a sense of him that becoming the Dragon Warrior. It signifies great wisdom, strength, and power, and means you are a legendary Kung Fu warrior. So one of the reasons why it's so bittersweet to hear this theme as Oogway Ascends is because actually Oogway represents everything that Poe wishes he could be. In his youth, he was a legendary Kung Fu warrior, and now he is a legendary Kung Fu teacher and master of himself. The entire franchise follows Poe's moves to become the gap and the void that Oogway leaves. So when you hear this theme, the theme of a legendary warrior whose Kung Fu ability is the stuff of legend, who we've associated with the aspirations of our protagonist, who is flawed in many ways, we lose a sense of hope as Oogway flies away into the distance. It's a really emotionally intelligent scene with emotionally intelligent music to boot. So in terms of some of the ways that Hans Zimmer and John Powell have actually made this effect on the audience, one of the great ways they've done this is through dynamics. And dynamics are essentially your louds, your quiets, your in-betweens. Playing things very loudly does not mean that it's going to be good, does not mean that it's going to hit you. Equally, playing things very, very softly will not guarantee you an emotional effect. Now, what's awesome about this track is that it gets loud, and loud is not necessarily associated with the kind of tender emotions that we're supposed to be feeling throughout this scene. But it's done in a really interesting and balanced way. So the part in the scene that the music really swells to fill in a void is Shifu proclaims, "A peach cannot defeat Tai Lung." And Oogway calmly responds to him, "Well, perhaps it can if you nurture it, if you guide it, if you believe in it." And as he says believe in it, that's where we hear the first kind of entry point of the track.
To believe in it. But how?
And you can hear it fading in underneath there.
Help, Master. No.
And so dynamically throughout this whole scene, the melody and the piece stays low and slow under the dialogue, really warming itself up. Now, despite this being a super tender moment in the film, the music swells up and swells loud. What this whole scene signifies lends itself really nicely to this dynamic play of bitter and sweet, soft and loud. As we kind of begin to piece together what's happening, the melody kind of swells in and takes over the bottom end. You hear a rumbling percussion under the bass to kind of really lift this moment. And despite the melody itself being so tender and gentle, reaching for this kind of legendary status, the instrumentation here takes the opposite approach. It takes the full-on, I will make you cry, by being so big and so wide. And this is only accentuated where later in the track, we actually hit a peak where this is the loudest the track gets. And you really feel it in your gut, not because the track is loud and heavy, but because it immediately undercuts this loud moment by going back to the tender and emotional moment for that final part of the scene. You see it goes from so loud to so soft and cut back. Just single layers of instruments instead of a whole orchestra. And then we come back in with the big swells. We come back in with the big guns straight after. Into a big crescendo at the end, where it all goes as all good tracks do. What's quite profound about this use of dynamics is that, as with everything in the story, it's a push and it's a pull. Some things will hurt for other things to be bigger and brighter. To quote Oogway himself, the past is history, the future is a mystery, and so you have this kind of certain uncertainty about both of those things. You can't change the past, you're stuck with the things that happened. You can't predict the future, you will never know. But because today is your gift, that's your balance. And the music kind of plays with this hard, soft, loud, quiet, dynamic shift throughout the whole track. And it really knows how to pull at the heartstrings. And this isn't just because the film is gloriously made up until this point either. The music alone is able to elicit this effect just by how it plays with the dynamics, how it brings in these more layers, pulls them away. And as I say, we crescendo into a nice beefy part in the middle to remind you of the legend that we're reaching towards, the mythical status that Oogway will take on as he ascends into the unknown. And then we pair back again to the loneliness and the frailness of Shifu and of Po, who neither of them have any idea what they're doing. So we finally hear this piece at the end of the film in a new light, when Po is finally accepted as the Dragon Warrior after defeating Tai Lung, and Master Shifu finds his peace.
The Dragon Warrior.
And this is kind of used as a visual gag as much as anything else. But actually the significance of this piece being used here is that Po has finally reached the place that he was looking up to throughout the whole film. And it comes back again when Shifu finally finds peace, because Shifu is now fully confident in everything that Oogway says. So you have this theme kind of symbolizing not only a legendary warrior and the person that Po needs to become in order to survive the film, in order to save China, but it also symbolizes the kind of inner peace and the need to overcome these struggles in order to become the best you can be. Shifu goes through it, Po goes through it, and Oogway obviously has gone through it to be able to give such great advice throughout the film. And I think that's kind of, again, it's a kiddie story, it's a simple and effective one, but actually the music is so well done and so persuasive in how it handles these very, very complex, bittersweet, two things at once emotions that it's worth commending. And I regularly go back, I listen to the Kung Fu Panda soundtrack. I love it. I think it's amazing. And Kung Fu Panda is up there with some of the great animated films that exist. But I'd love to know your thoughts anyway, and I'd love to know if this kind of breakdown has helped you see how the music and how the use of the music helps to build such an intense affect throughout the entire movie. So thanks for watching. I'm glad you guys are liking these breakdowns because I'm loving making them. And I'm looking forward to making the next one. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas for good movies you want to break down, good scores you want to break down, even good pieces of music. I'm dead into this, so, let me know. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.